Before the world was young, there was Egypt. Like the Nile River that defines this land, Egypt has flowed from one millennium to the next, profoundly changing the world along the way. 5,000 years ago, when Europeans lived in huts and the Chinese were just starting their great march towards civilization, there was Egypt. Ancient Egyptians contemplated life and death, philosophy and economics, war and peace. And from this great land, the modern world evolved. Perhaps this is why Egypt has always fascinated the outside world. Strategically located on the Mediterranean in North Africa, on the edge of the Middle East, Egypt is the most populous Mideast nation and home of 1 in 3 Arabs. Egypt is the heart of the Arab world, its cultural epicenter, its strategic fulcrum. Egypt is also a country of profound problems and dangerous pent-up frustrations. I'm Eric Margolis, and it is my assignment to travel the world to explore the places that are misunderstood and misrepresented. This time, I am in Egypt, a country that has a special place in my heart, as coming to Cairo is a homecoming of sorts for me. This was the apartment building in Zamalek, Cairo, the elegant diplomatic part of Cairo, where I lived when I was 14 years old. And it was 1957, was a very exciting year in Egypt. I was invited to live with the family of the president of Esso in the Middle East, Esso Oil Company. And as they used to say in those days, in heaven there is Allah, and on earth there's Esso. And probably not much difference today. This seething, sometimes generous, sometimes harsh country is at once closed and extremely tense, while also being open and embracing. It is confusing to outsiders and to Egyptians alike. A product of a glorious ancient past and a grim recent one, Egypt today is in a state of profound change. It is hard to understand, but impossible to ignore, and that is part of what defines Egypt. This great civilization has always beguiled and befuddled the wider world. The ancient Romans flocked here to wonder at the pyramids. You know, there are 2 views of these great pyramids, one of the wonders of the world. The first one is, in my humble view, they were the best investment in tourism ever made since the advent of man. Well, just think about that, built 4,500 years ago, at great expense and done by just manual labor, but they were built here, and for the last 4,500 years, tourists have been drawn to Egypt to see these wonders and have paid and have provided the Egyptian economy with over 10% of its income. Of course, there's another side to this story, and that's why I do this show. Another alternative view of the pyramids was made by the Albanian novelist Ismail Kadare. Kadare wrote this wonderful book called Pyramid, which was an allegory of communism, in which he used the pharaohs building these mighty pyramids, in which the entire population of the country was dragooned into work and forced into virtual slavery to create these great monuments. And this is how the communists and all totalitarian regimes keep their people subjugated and broken, is by imposing these monstrous tasks on them. So as we wonder at the greatness of the pyramids and the joy, we have to remember that it also had a very negative side. Modern cultures are often built on the broken dreams and shards of ancient civilizations. And so archaeological ruins aren't simply monuments from the past, they're often potent symbols of the present. How much does the grandeur and the magic of ancient Egypt, which is all around us, affect ordinary Egyptians today in their life?
Well, there's still a lot of things that we copy from ancient Egypt, even in the language. There are a few words that we speak in our everyday colloquial Arabic. They came from hieroglyphics. A lot of the traditions concerning birth and death, and sometimes even marriage, they came to us from ancient Egypt. If you trace a lot of our culture elements, a lot of them they go back to ancient Egypt. So ancient Egypt is still alive, and it lives among us, and it lives within us. You know, ancient Egypt never died. Don't forget that the Egyptians built that civilization asking for eternity, and I'm totally positive that they have achieved eternity.
Achieving eternity is no easy feat. Ask the Sumerians or Mayans. But the Egyptians have succeeded in creating a culture that impressively spans mankind's continuum. The challenge for Egypt, though, won't be so much to preserve the last 5,000 years as to write the next 15. Over the centuries, modern Cairo has encroached upon the pyramids in much the same way that modern problems have intruded upon Egypt. The city is noisy and chaotic, it's crowded and sometimes unkempt. It is a modern city of 8 million forged upon the backs of a small ancient town. Behind me is one of the most interesting places in Cairo, up on the Mokattam Hills behind me, the famous citadel of the great Arab Kurdish lord Salah ad-Din, who defeated the Crusaders and drove them out of Palestine, is revered today as the most famous leader of the Muslim world until the modern era. When it was built, there was really no Cairo here. The mosque dates from the late 1800s, and at that time, Cairo probably had a population of less than 2 million people. So over these ages, as the rural population of Egypt has flooded into Cairo, the city has grown around and is swallowing up everything, including the citadel here in the Mokattam Hills, which used to be considered once way out in the deserts. The people of Cairo are mostly concerned with surviving the present, but the remnants of history still dominate, both physically and symbolically. The city's energy comes from its people. The markets bustle, hawkers hawk, shopkeepers haggle with shoppers, traffic is crazy, life goes on. Egypt has always held a special soft spot for me in my heart. My mother lived here for a while. She worked here as a journalist. She interviewed Anwar Sadat, and she interviewed Nasser and King Hussein of Jordan. She instilled in me an interest in the Middle East. Understanding the turbulent Mideast is critical these days. It is perhaps the most misunderstood part of the world and certainly one of the most important regions. The Arab world is changing, and the West needs to adjust to this new dynamic. And so I am going to try to discover Egypt's future.